I know exactly what I am, and also I have no idea. I'm figuring that out, just like everyone else. So it's just kind of a hilarious concept in general for people to be like, this is what I am. It's restrictive. Then you don't let yourself become something better than you could have ever imagined, maybe.
Hi, I'm Nick, and I'm joined by Shawn Mendes for the latest in Enemies in Conversation series. How's it going today?
Good, man. Happy to be here.
How does it feel to be back on the promo circuit?
It feels, it feels a lot. I don't know, also, it feels different, I think. I think this time around, just like the music itself asks for an entirely different environment and energy. Like I just even noticed, even just like walking into the room with all of you here, like after last night, yeah, I think you guys just have a different energy around me because of the music. So that's cool. I like that.
You've been previewing the album at a series of like intimate gigs where people go in probably just knowing 2 songs, they don't know the album.
Mm-hmm.
What made you want to do it that way?
I think it felt like the album was such a, it felt like it was such a whole, like a cohesive piece, that I felt like in order for people to really understand the individual songs, they had to see the whole picture. And also just like something I always wanted to do and have never done before, and it felt like a really great album to do it. A lot of it's stripped down, a lot of it's acoustic. So yeah, I thought to myself, like, this would be like, for instance, if John Mayer, if he was putting out a new album, he's like, I'm gonna go play it kind of acoustic, stripped down, top to bottom, I would be personally really excited to see that show. So, yeah.
What was the starting point for the album? Was there one kind of song that sparked it, one musical idea?
There Isn't That Enough, which was the first song we put out, which is kind of like that Crosby, Stills and Nash energy. I think there was a big transition for me because a lot of this album was just about reminding me that I know how to sit with a guitar in my hand and just sing in a room of people. And it wasn't this entirely hyper-processed, hyper-edited, polished, produced thing. It was just like reverting back to basics. And, over the last couple of years, even just with friends I made and stuff, like I've played music for 10 years, but actually like in a room with like 5 people, I never would pull my guitar out or never would sit and sing or play piano because I was so insecure of messing up. And so over the course of the 2 years, I started just like doing that more and more around people I loved, and it became more normal. And then in the studio, we were just like, there was this kind of breakthrough moment where we were sitting there singing this song, and we're like, just put one mic in front of us and let's sing it live, top to bottom. And that was that song. And so for all its imperfection, it made something really special. You captured a moment in time, which I think doesn't happen when you're producing something to pieces. You get sonic perfection, but you might not get the heart that comes through that captured imperfection. So that moment in particular was really, really profound for me, because I was like, all right, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do this a little differently, and actually inspired a few of the songs to work like that. Actually, I would say 3 of my favorite songs on the album were just recorded with one mic live.
Was picking the right collaborators important because you were wanting to go back to basics? Did you need the right people around you to feel comfortable doing that?
It's absolutely everything. I think a great producer is not only someone who can make the song sound great, but it's someone who knows how to get the best out of the artist they're working with. And that was my main concern. Like, there was no one in the world I could have made this album with other than the guys I did, because they are some of my best, closest friends. And I needed to be around people that I felt safe around, and just like, we can mess up and we can not make a song. We can spend 3 days struggling and then call it at the end of the day, because it didn't matter if something came through, because we also just enjoyed spending time together. And I think that type of energy creates the intimacy that the album has,
What kind of atmosphere do you like in the studio?
A lot of candles, the lights low. To be honest, I just like it when it's low pressure when everyone is kind of simultaneously surrendered to the fact that whether or not a good song comes today is not entirely up to us. You know, we can show up with all our tools and everything we know, but the truth is that songs come when they want, and you just kind of got to be there to catch them and work them when they do. So,
as I understand it, the first song that you wrote for the album was Who I Am.
Yeah.
And on that song you sing, I don't really know who I am right now.
Yeah.
Was making this album part of figuring out who you are?
Absolutely. I think it's there was a lot of time. I made the album actually quite quick. It was 6 months, maybe even less. We actually wrote and produced it, but it was 2.5 years of creating from within, you know. Yeah, I had a really emotional kind of experience when I sang the album top to bottom for the first time, just because I almost had this out-of-body experience where I was witnessing how all these songs were connecting to the last 2 years of life, and how the things I was hoping for, like in Who I Am, were very true in that moment. And all the seeds that I planted 2 years ago and hoping that there would be more love and more laughter and more life that was happening was actually happening in the moment. And so, yeah, it really has been my medicine in so many ways. Like, it really has.
Another one of the great songs from the album, The Mountain, you spoke about it at the show last night.
Yeah.
That was one that was very important to you. What inspired that song, and what's the kind of story behind it?
It's not, maybe it's not for everyone, but for me, I have quite an existential place I like to go to sometimes, and I had a ton of questions just about a lot of different things, and I think it was really just a moment for me to tell my side of the story and to just claim myself instead of having other people do it in a way that they wanted to, and just kind of write back at some article. Usually I don't really care what people write about in articles and stuff, but there was a couple that I was just like, this is bullshit. I need to write a song just to kind of, you know, and it was empowering for me, because the end line at every phrase is like, so call it what you want. Like, ultimately, you can say it's this and say it's that and say that I'm this and say that I'm that, but I know what I am. So you can call it what you want all day long. And that was an empowering phrase for me to get to.
Yeah, some of the lyrics in the song, you can say I'm too young, you can say I'm too old, you can say like girls or boys, whatever fits your mold. Was it, you talk about it being empowering, was it empowering to kind of sing about something in what seems like quite a playful, nonchalant way? It's kind of you being like, say what you want, I know what I am. Exactly.
There's so much pressure on everything, on us to know everything and us to be so clear on everything. And also, I know exactly what I am, and also, I have no idea. I'm figuring that out, just like everyone else. So it's just kind of a hilarious concept in general for people to be like, this is what I am. It's restrictive. Then you don't let yourself become something better than you could have ever imagined, maybe.
I feel like everyone's trying to figure themselves out in their 20s, but just very few people have to do it with the glare that you also have.
I appreciate you saying that. I agree. And yeah, I was talking about this with a friend last night, actually. And yeah, I think, you know, it can be like the pressure of discovering yourself in the public eye can be like really annoying and frustrating, or it can be an opportunity to do it in a way that hopefully inspires other people to be okay with being confused about things, you know.
Do you feel like you found a balance between being a private person and being in the public eye, or is that a kind of constant negotiation? Does it change?
It's a constant negotiation, okay. Yeah. It really depends on the day. And I think, yeah, because I've gone through swings where I'm just like deleted social media and deleted. I've pretended that no one can see me. And that wasn't right. And then I've gone through places where all I can think about is what people think, or how they see me, and that wasn't right. So, yeah, it's a constant relationship, you know, like anything.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I feel like previewing the album in such an intimate way, having that kind of really deep connection with fans is a nice way of kind of like coming back on your own terms, isn't it?
Yeah. It felt really important just to be like, it felt really important for me to write an album from this place and also just exist from this place, because like even right now I just recognize how much easier this is for me, because there's nothing I have to try to be. There's no perception or persona I have to withhold right now. I can just sit here and speak as I am, and that is such an easier existence, and I really wanted to set myself up for that, you know?
The album is really raw musically and lyrically. Were there any songs you were apprehensive about sharing with the world? I mean, you spoke really movingly last night. One of the songs on the album, Heartstone, is about a friend of yours who's no longer with us.
Yeah, I think, to be honest with you, this was the first time where it was very clear to me, regardless of whether it was scary, if a song had to be on the album or not. It was very obvious. One song in particular was actually Who I Am. And that was just because so much time had passed since I wrote it that I almost felt like, oh no, I don't know if I agree with that. But I knew that ultimately, because of my team like reminding me how important to just give the whole story, you know? And so this time, more than any other time, it felt like there was a place for every song, and it was very easy to know.
What made you want to cover Leonard Cohen's Hallelujah? I mean, he's a Canadian icon. I was just in Montreal, and there's a huge mural of him in the city centre, and I was like, wow, it really brought home to me how big he is for Canadian musicians.
Yeah, I mean, and I've watched so many interviews of him. He went and he lived as a monk in a Japanese monastery in Los Angeles. And I was like, in another world, that was like probably something I would have tried to do. And you know, it's great. Like, I watched this interview, and in the interview he's like, what, you know, they're like, what have you learned after, you know, how many years being at the monastery? And he's like, I've learned that whatever I'm looking for, I'm never going to find, and it's already here. And he's like, I might not have needed to go to the monastery to learn that. And I remember watching it being like, cool, noted. But Hallelujah was a song that I gravitated towards a lot as a kid. And I just sang it a ton. I posted covers of it online on YouTube when I was like 15, 16. And actually never really paid attention to the lyrics because I never really could grasp the concept of what he was reckoning with, which was the idea of God and spirit. And at 26, after going through my own kind of relationship with that, those lyrics just felt so resonant, and it just felt like the right time. Like I said, we were in the studio, the album was basically done, and I was in the studio, and I just had this overwhelming feeling that I had to do a cover of that song. So we put the harmonium on the ground, we set up a mic, and I just sang 3 takes of it. And that was what made it to the album. And so it was really just trusting these gut feelings that would come up. And that to me, that's probably, if not one of, it is the greatest song ever written. And I'll always feel that way.
You played the harmonium on stage when you did Hallelujah last night, and you spoke about learning to play the harmonium and how that was important in your creative journey. What did learning that new instrument, because it's an instrument that most people probably haven't ever seen played before, it kind of looks a bit like an organ.
It does, yeah. Sounds like
why did you gravitate towards that instrument, and how did that help with this creative process?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, a lot of the stuff that I started to sing with it at first was like traditional kirtan music. So it's songs where I'm singing in Sanskrit, not even in English. And I think learning a song in a different language, in India they use all these different types of semitones and tritones, and it's totally different. It kind of just got me out of my head and into a place of like, this feels nice, you know? And I did that for a long time, and then I started to kind of just wean off and to do my own version of it. And it was just a really powerful tool. Like, I wasn't sitting at a piano making a pop song. I was singing an old song, 10,000 plus years old, and just completely took me out of my own head, you know?
Is it, like the way you spoke last night and also the way you're speaking today, is it fair to say with this album you've kind of tried to make music for you again and not worrying about what people think a Shawn Mendes song should sound like?
I think that's super fair to say. I also really think that like people make their best music when it's true and honest, and I think it's really obvious when people make music for everyone else. And I think you can get a good song, or a great song even out of that. But the songs that I personally feel most connected to, it's obvious the writer was just writing from a place of authenticity, not for everybody else, you know.
I think fans can always tell when it's totally authentic and when it's a song that's maybe a bit more kind of...
Yeah, everyone's bullshit radar is much higher than it used to be these days. Like, you can't really get away with, you can't claim to be honest and then you have this much room, you know?
Do you ever look at your songs on Genius? Because I mean, sometimes if I'm like doing research for an interview, I go on there and some of the citations are incredibly detailed and the theories are
really?
like, yeah.
I never looked at those. I gotta go look.
Maybe you don't.
Okay.
But honestly, some fans, it's like they're detectives these days.
Yeah.
They'll read so much into like a, you know, what seems like, you know, a kind of throwaway phrase.
And I think a big part of, for me, was also just like getting back to a place where, like, for me, my favorite art is when the person who's created it really trusts me to understand it. They're not spoon feeding me something because they think I don't get it. It's really like, you got it. Like, and this might be different, this might be complex, this might be off, but like, I trust you to dissect it and digest it in a way that you will. And I think for me, that was this album in a lot of ways too, was just like, writing from a place that was like, I trust everyone to, you know, receive it, and I trust them to get it, you know.
Who are your musical reference points when making the album? Because it's kind of, I would say it's a folky album with some country, there's a lot of mandolin on there.
Sure. Yeah, it's definitely, I think mainly it was really inspired by a lot of music from the 70s. It was just like 70s classic rock, like James Taylor, Crosby, Stills and Nash, John Denver. Yeah, I was just listening to so much Joni Mitchell, just songwriters, Bob Dylan. I never listened to Bob Dylan. And just listening to these writers just write about real things. And it almost felt like strip things down. And there was just a different kind of feeling in music in the 70s that I think was really reflective of the times, and that I just really resonated with it. So yeah, a lot of that type of music.
Is it hard to kind of recreate the warmth of those 70s records in the studio these days? Because obviously like technology's kind of moved on, which in some ways makes things, you're talking about perfection, but maybe it can make things a bit more clinical.
It does, absolutely. I think it feels almost impossible to recreate that warmth, to be honest. It's like, but I think it has a lot to do with just bravery of writing and lyricism, and yeah, like I think so many people are doing great stuff like that today, but I think Zach Bryan's a great example of someone who's just released the grip of perfection, and it's coming through as such heart in a gorgeous way, you know.
A song that went around really well last night was Heavy.
Yeah.
What's that song about? How did it come together?
Yeah.
It kind of feels like one of those songs that you've known forever. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's got that kind of real classic feel to it.
Good. I think kind of like what I said last night was just, it really was this, and I know a lot of people are like this, and maybe some people don't struggle with this, but it felt like for me, for too long, I was and I was the only person in control of this. I was just carrying the weight of everything on my own shoulders. And I believed that no one could understand, and no one could help me, and no one could, you know, support because they don't get it. And honestly, that type of belief just like made me feel so isolated and alone. And when I started to finally just like open up to the people in my life who loved me and who wanted to support me, like I just realized like, oh, this is real vulnerability. Like vulnerability is not like, hey, I'm being vulnerable, I'm gonna talk about it on camera in front of us. Like vulnerability is doing it when you don't want to, and it's not on your terms, and it's really like uncomfortable. And doing that with my friends and family like slowly just started to just unravel me into a puddle. And that was a moment there. I think what's beautiful is actually the album and that song, you're gonna you hear more backing vocals than ever from people that are not me. And I'm just realizing this right now, actually, metaphorically, it really shows you, like, I actually needed support to even be in the studio singing those songs. You'll hear Eddie Benjamin's vocal and Mike Sabbath's vocal so many times throughout the record, because as we were recording it, they were literally right here and right here singing it with me. And that type of support, it would change everything to me, you know.
Do you feel you're able to put less pressure on yourself now? Because, I mean, on one hand, you probably want this album to do as well as it possibly can.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Honestly, I'm so exhausted of caring so much about, you know, things working out in a way that the world deems successful. I'm tired of that, because following down that perception being the most important thing just led me to the most depressed and exhausted I ever was in my life. And so and not even say this in like a jaded, I hope I don't sound jaded, honestly, I really care about being happy and I really care about being myself. And like, of course I want it to do well. Of course I want people to love it, but I definitely don't want people to love it and it to do well at the sacrifice of my happiness and my sense of self. So that's kind of where I'm at with that.
Well, I felt all your fans who were at the gig last night seeing you happy on stage must have been really a relief from them after what happened with having to cancel your previous tour because of your mental health issues. The fact you seemed to be enjoying yourself on stage would be amazing for them to see.
Yeah, I remember halfway through the show asking myself, like, something's wrong. Like, because I'm like, this feels easy. This feels not stressful. I'm not panicking. I feel at ease. I feel really grounded about what's happening. I don't feel like I'm on some planet and they're on another planet. I feel like there's a bunch of people in front of me enjoying their evening and I'm here enjoying my evening and this is all just happening. And like, I got off stage and I went straight into a therapy call because I was confused by that sensation. So I was so used to connecting anxiety and panic and nervousness with greatness. And I think that's something that we're taught in the society. And I really, in my own self, want to shift that. You can feel, it can be easeful, and it can be nice, and it can be calm, and still be great.
Yeah, that kind of tortured genius trope is really damaging.
Damaging, and it's so intertwined with our culture that we didn't even realize how it's writing our own story for us.
You spoke on stage last night about back in 2021, you felt really lonely on stage. Was that something that had you felt that way for a while, or had it kind of gradually crept up on you? That
I think it gradually crept up. You know, I started playing in theaters and started playing with just an acoustic guitar, and things felt much more connected. And then as things got bigger and bigger and bigger, I just felt physically further from people, but also emotionally further. I felt like, oh, so I'm on this pedestal or something, and this doesn't make sense. I don't know why. And I felt far and distant. And John Mayer said this great thing in an interview. He said his dream is to have the stage be level with the crowd. And obviously the stage is never going to be level. But metaphorically, I thought that made so much sense. It's like, there should be no difference between like that connection. And I just always loved that. I thought that was really smart.
Does the idea of doing an arena tour again appeal to you, or do you feel as though you're not in that space now?
To be honest, like, I think there is always a side of me that wants to go and play and rip a huge show and like it be like so much energy and so fun. And I'm not going to allow my fear of the past control the future in that sense. So if that urge starts to come back, I'm not going to fight it. So yes. I'll let that play out.
What does success feel like to you at this point?
That's a great question, man. I think it's something I think about every day. And I think success to me feels like any type of, like if we talk about this interview, for instance, when I leave the room and I walk out of this room and I go, hey, I was really just myself in that interview. I wasn't trying to please him. I wasn't trying to please the camera. I wasn't trying to please anyone. I was just like being honest. That's an extremely successful thing, because I think it's tough to do that. Like as a human, I don't claim to do that all the time. I think we're always constantly like sensitive and aware of everyone and, trying to please and all that. So success for me is just like, was that authentic? And after that, did people enjoy it? And then after that, all the other things. And a dream of mine would be able to be completely authentic and for it to be a #1 song and there to be, you know, crowds of hundreds of thousands of people. Like, that's the dream. And I'm going to hold on to that. They can be one, you know.
At what point did you realize that it really was your urge to be a people pleaser? Because I feel like a lot of us are like that.
Yeah, I think it's so normal to be a people pleaser. And I think just as, it's almost like as time, if you're young and you know, when I was young, I remember so many like different adults and people being, oh, you're so mature when you say this and when you do that, and that's so great. And that validation feels really good, obviously, as a kid. And so you want to kind of keep that persona up of what people think about you being. I remember a really big one for me was like being really nice. And it wasn't until I was like off tour and I was with a really close group of friends, and one day they came up to me and they're like, dude, you being this nice guy all the time is annoying. Like, we don't want that. We just want your truth. And I remember that hit me so hard because I realized, like, even when I wasn't actually feeling nice, I was acting nice, you know? And just little by little, I think I've just let go of those things. I don't think you have to be a good person and be a nice person, but I don't think you need to constantly please.
Do you feel that you're mature for your age now? It's interesting that people often said that about you. I guess you worked from such a young age, that would make you mature.
There's a lot of things. Maybe I was more sensitive as a kid, that I picked up on emotional things, but like, I think, yeah, when you're 15 and you travel the world and you start to do what I did, you grow up quickly, you know, no matter who you are. So yeah, I owe a lot of that. If that maturity is there, a lot of it's to that.
If you could go back and give advice to your 15-year-old self, what would that advice be?
Honestly, I wouldn't say a thing to him. He had to go through some of that stuff to learn. You know, and advice, he needed to hit some walls in order to figure out where the actual course was, you know. We
spoke about this album being like you figuring out who you are. That was a big part of what you were doing on this album. What do you kind of aspire to be at this point? What's the goal for the future? Not even as a musician, as a person. That's a beautiful question. I really just aspire, at 26, I'm sure this will change, because it has, but I really love to be around people who I can tell are really like themselves, and they're in their body, and they're just like, it feels like they've taken the time to really love on themselves and be honest, and that's what I aspire to be. And I think that will translate in a career sense, and in a personal relationship sense, you know. Are you quite good at reading people's energies at this point? Because you've met so many people. I'm an energy reader. I don't even know how to answer that question, to be honest. Who am I to say I'm good at that? But you know the sort of people you want to surround yourself with. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I know who I want to surround myself with, you know. Yeah. Why did you decide to name the album just Shawn? That's a good question. Were there other album titles in contention? There was a lot. And obviously I already have a self-titled album, Shawn Mendes, and it felt really sincere. Like, the only people in my life who call me Shawn are the people who are closest to me, you know. Well, a lot of people in my close family call me Shawnee, but I thought that wasn't going to be the best title. And although I did bring it up. And I was like, yeah, I think, like I said, it's that thing of, I think people will get it. Even you asked me that question, I think you totally get why I've called it Shawn. It's the stripped back kind of me before all of everything else. Why was Why the right song to kind of come back with? Why is that the first single? Whether it's the right song or not is something I don't know, but I think that was a song that I wanted to put out just because I felt like it addressed a lot of things. And it did it in a way that had no period at the end. It was kind of just an open-ended thing. It was for more to be discussed about it, you know. I mean, you address the tour that you cancelled in those lyrics, which it feels like it's saying, I'm coming back and I'm not hiding anything, I'm just going to be completely me. And I didn't even plan on that or addressing anything. It just felt, that song in particular felt really natural to do so, you know. How do you feel like the music industry has changed in the 10 years you've been doing it? I mean, I always forget that like Vine was where you kind of popped off, and that's not, there is no Vine anymore.
No. In some ways, I feel like an old man in this industry. And then in other ways, I feel like it's still really similar, you know? The advice I give myself all the time is just like, don't focus on what everyone's doing. Like, be inspired and love what everyone's doing if you do, but like, don't focus on it as a guiding light for what you're doing.
There's a couple of references to your mother on the album. I was wondering, when you played it to her, what was her verdict? And were you nervous about playing it to her because it is so vulnerable and raw?
Yeah. I remember when I played her Isn't That Enough, the video. She was just so, it's completely not something she would say, but when that video finished, she looked at me and she goes, "Oh babe, you found yourself." And I thought that was so beautiful. And I never, she doesn't say things like that. I just never will forget that, because clearly that was what that felt like to her. There was no portraying of something, it was just being of me.
It's quite an amazing response.
Yeah, I can't imagine a better one from your mum.
Who do you normally play your music for first when the song's kind of in progress?
Probably my best friend, Brian, or my sister. They're probably the first two people I show.
And are they both quite honest?
They're very honest. They're brutally honest. And I think that's why I was so happy with this album, because they truly loved it. And they were just connected to it. I felt like there was no thinking, or were people like this? I mean, I think people were like, they were never saying stuff like that, like they have in the past. It was just like, no, I've been listening to it, so that's all I know, you know.
Which song on the album was hardest to write?
Heart of Gold was hard to write. That one took a long time to, yeah, it just took time. It felt like moving through mud.
I guess when you're writing about someone who meant so much to you who's not there, it kind of has to be exactly right.
Yeah, you want to say the right things. You want to honor that relationship. You don't want to just like say words because they sound good or feel good. So that was the hard part, you know.
I'll ask one more question, it's slightly cheesy. When people hear the name Shawn Mendes or they see it on a poster, what do you want them to think? Or have you got to a point where you don't care?
I think it's like, what do I want them to think?
Yeah.
Oh God, I mean, I think if they think, oh, that guy, yeah, that's a pretty good, that's a good step. Like, you know, it's like, if people are like, yeah, that guy, yeah, he's a good guy. Like, that's a pretty good place to be. But honestly, at this point, like, I know so many people are just gonna think so many things about me, and I guess I don't really care as much as I used to about that, to be honest.
That feels like progress, I think.
I think that's some progress.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you,
it's
man.
It's been really fun to hear about the album.
Yeah,
Thank you.
appreciate it.